encryption methods, we looked at two types of encryption. One is the digital encryption standard, which is a symmetric key encryption, and an RSA standard, which is really a public key encryption. Actually, I said that RSA stands for the names of three people. The names of three people are Rivest, Shamir, and Adelman. These are three persons belonging to the Department of Computer Science and Mathematics, who together invented the RSA algorithm for this public private key combination, and it is extremely useful method. We also saw how the two can be combined to get the speed of symmetric key encryption and the key distribution problem, which is eliminated in the RSA system. So, the two are combined together, then you have an effective method which is both fast, at the same time it avoids key distribution. It also allows you to change the key for every transmission, and that affords you more security, because even if a cryptanalyst who is supposed to try to break the code gets hold of samples of messages, it will be difficult for the analyst to be able to do any kind of a decoding, because the key is continuously being changed, and they are actually randomly picked, and you don't really know what key he is going to pick. So, generally then the encryption methods have been fairly well standardized and have been used, and even though I talked about all algorithms and things like that, which is of course necessary for computer science and computer application students to know, because they have to know what is inside, what goes inside these coding systems. From the point of the user, he doesn't really have to understand. Normally these methods are provided on your desktop machine, and by a click of a button you can ask for encryption using RSA. There is a public key encryption system. So, most of the security methods from the user's point of view are primarily using a secure securized link, which actually when they say secure link, effectively it means that the data has been encrypted, and the encryption keys are actually picked based on, of course, if it is a private key public key system, that is based on the private key public key algorithm. Okay. So, this is essentially what in other words, from the point of view of say a management student or a lay user, he doesn't really have to know all the intricacies of the algorithm which goes into doing it, but of course it would be nice to know what it involves. That is only for education, but as of today many of these things have been put as software inside a computer, and they are essentially as I said, through a click of a button you can get hold of these encryption methods. Now, there is another important requirement in electronic commerce, and that is called digital signature. Now, let us see why there is a need for digital signature. Suppose you send a purchase order or say a letter to a vendor, purchase order to a vendor for supplying some items, or it could be a letter accepting some tender conditions or tender value from a vendor, and you may or it may be some kind of a query to the vendor or clarifications and so on, and the vendor also, when he sends his quote, he's got to sign that quote, because later on he cannot say that that quote was not sent by me, it was sent by somebody else, because in the internet you don't really see the other person personally. So in a non-electronic world, that is when the internet was not prevalent, primarily all business communications used to take place by mail. You send things by post or by courier, and these are all actually letters which are written or typed, and then they are signed at the bottom. Now what the signature signifies when a letter comes is that the person who has signed has read the entire letter and he is authenticating that letter. So he will stand by it tomorrow. Suppose he has given a quote for buying some, for selling you some items. The quotation, the terms and conditions will all be kind of typed out, and then at the bottom he would have signed it, and there also will be a seal of the company to authenticate it, and the whole thing is put into maybe a sealed envelope and sent to you. So you have certain amount of faith in terms of the fact that he cannot repudiate. In other words, repudiation means he cannot go back later on and say, I didn't really send this letter, I didn't really send this quote. Suppose the quote was a low quote and you accepted it, and later on he says that I did not give that quotation, then of course he can be penalized, because he has got this letter, you got that letter, it is signed, so you can always go to a court of law and use that letter and say that this person is repudiated. That's in bad faith, that is he said he will do something, he did not do it. So he could be punished either by imposing a penalty or by requiring him to supply the items as quoted. So the written document gives a certain amount of feeling of security to the recipient about the good faith of the person who sent that communication. Now in the internet world there are two difficulties. One difficulty is that the person with whom you are corresponding, the vendor, may have no physical presence. What I mean by no physical presence is he may not have a physical shop, a physical address. He only has a web presence. He is present on the internet. He has got a web address. That is number one. But even a person with a web address, there are two types of companies which operate. Even if you have a web address, you must have some kind of a permanent postal address where you are putting all your computers and working from there, or your workstations and so on. So there must be some physical location where all these computers are placed. So there should be an address. But as far as the person on the other end of the communication line is concerned, he doesn't really know and he doesn't care, because you are essentially doing all transactions by email. Okay, so it's all web presence which is relevant there. So that is number one. That is, you don't really know anything about the physical presence of the person, whether he is indeed physically present or he is a phantom company which only has a web presence, and he may be a what they call fly by the night operator. That means somebody who kind of opens shop and then closes and runs away after promising a number of things and collecting money maybe from you and not delivering. So that is one problem. The second problem is that suppose you do send a purchase order, suppose he does send a quote to you, the quotation which comes on the email. So it is not physically signed It is actually a name may be put or a company name may be put. There is no physical seal also there, because it's a set of bits which have come on the internet and gotten typed on your word processor as an email message. So there is no physical signature. Because there is no physical signature, anybody can really masquerade as you, in the sense that somebody can, if he wants to sully your reputation, put your name and send some fake message. Okay. So this is a real problem. In other words, masquerading as somebody else and sending a message, so that you have some method of authenticating that the message indeed came from the person who claims to have sent that message. That is number one. You should have to make sure that nobody masquerades. Secondly, you have to make sure that he cannot repudiate. Suppose the person did indeed send you a quotation, later on he cannot say I didn't send it. So both these requirements of non-repudiation and somebody not masquerading as or doing an impersonation job of a particular company or a person, these two require an equivalent of the physical signature, and that is called digital signature. And digital signature is nowadays considered as good as a physical signature, because the way in which the digital signature is really formed, if a signed message comes to you using a digital signature of the sender, the algorithms which are used are such that he cannot repudiate and nobody else can masquerade. So this particular document, which is digitally signed, now gives the same kind of security, in the sense that any impersonation or any reneging or repudiation can be taken to a court of law, and the court can actually find out if the digital signature is really authentic signature or not. The point I am trying to make is that the authenticity of digital signature nowadays is as good as the authenticity of a human handwritten signature. Further, in order to kind of ensure that courts of law do take cognizance, or they do consider digital signature as legal, the requirement for legal act, and that has been done. The Information Technology Act of 2000 does give a certain kind of a protection for electronic communication by defining what digital signature is, and by defining what is repudiation, non-repudiation, what is masquerading, and so on. So there are two things which are required. One is the legal infrastructure, and the other is the electronic infrastructure. The legal infrastructure and the electronic infrastructure are now both in place in India and many other countries. Once they are in place, now one can confidently then use the digital signature to do communications in commerce, like you do physical signature and so on. In fact, the most important thing about a signature is that it is tied to the message. That is, it is tied to the letter or the quote which comes. And suppose there are some cuttings in a physical situation, you sign on the side, and also sometimes on documents you say so many corrections have been made in this document. But of course in the electronic world no cutting is required, because as you know in a word processor change is so easy. If somebody made a error, there is no need to kind of cut it by hand and things like that. In any case you can't cut it by hand because it is going to come as a set of bits. So your word processor, you can kind of go there, correct it, and the corrected message or the corrected bit string is what comes to the recipient. So ultimately the entire message, at the bottom of it there is a signature. So signature must have two characteristics. There is one is that it should be unique to the sender. That is why I am sending a message to you. I must have a unique signature, and I can show later on in a court of law that it is indeed signed by me. Okay. Same thing from both sides. There is B can also say that A signed it. Number 2 is that the signature must be such that it should be tied to the message. In other words, the entire message at the bottom which the signature appears, that message also should be kind of, in other words, if a message is altered by somebody, the alteration should reflect as a part of the signature. So no alterations are allowed by say vandals and so on. So the whole point is that the signature also incorporates the entire message, and the message effectively is authenticated. All right. So to kind of, I said in let me just look at transparencies now, just to kind of recapitulate what I have said. It is needed to ensure that a message received from say A is indeed from him. Signature should be tied to the message sent by A. These are two important things which I told you about. Now what are the, so having said that, now we have to say what is the method or technique I use to sign. Okay. And the method or technique I use to sign is essentially based on the RSA algorithm. Okay. So the sender sends a key using an RSA system. Okay, just like it's a combination of RSA and DES as usual, and sender sends plain text using DES. Receiver decrypts the ciphertext using DES and the key received from the sender, and call it the received message. So message is sent, it is encrypted. If our RSA system is used, then what will be encrypted with? Recipient's public key. So you know the recipient's public key. So the recipient's public key is the one which is used to actually encrypt the key, and having encrypted the key, that is received by the recipient, and that key can be used to decipher what is sent by DES, which is a symmetric algorithm. Of course, one need not use this hybrid. One can just send a message by using RSA only. That is, what you could do is take the message. In this case, the message may be a quotation or a purchase order, whatever, some business document, and you encrypt it using the public key of the receiver. And the public key and the receiver can decrypt it with his private key. So the message has come. So this is only a little bit of a frill I put there. This frill is not essential, because the public key private key system is fairly well established, and I will know the public key of the recipient from his website. So I can actually encrypt it using his public key, and he will have his own private key, and he can decrypt it. Okay, so that's straightforward. And in fact, many of the computer-based systems, desktop-based systems at home and even in some companies uses only RSA. Even though the algorithm is a little complex and slow, by a click of a button the entire thing happens. So I can send a message saying that encrypt using RSA and give the public key as the recipient, and the machine will encrypt it with that public key, and it will go to the recipient, and he can just give a click saying that decrypt, and then it will just decrypt and give him the plain text. Okay. So having done this, the sender hashes the message M using a hashing function. What is meant by hash is that you take the entire message, and the entire message could be very long. So what you try to do is you map the entire message. After all, it is a bit string. Map it to another equivalent smaller string, which is called a hash string. It is also called a message digest. That is, you take a message and use a hashing function. Hashing function is nothing but something which kind of preserves the content of the message, but makes makes it shorter. That's why it is called a digest. It is something like when you write an essay, you ask somebody asks you to write a summary, an abstract, or a précis. So the message digest is somewhat like an abstract or a précis of the entire message. The précis must actually reflect what is contained in that, and it should be unique. In other words, two different messages should hash to two unique hashed results. It is like saying two independent, suppose two people write articles. There are two articles and two abstracts. If the articles are different on different subjects, the abstracts also will be different. It will reflect what is contained in that, and the abstract will be unique. Similarly, the message hash has to be unique. That is a characteristic of a hashing function. There are many hashing functions which have been proposed. One of them, which is called MD5, message digest algorithm 5, proposed again by the company formed by, it's called RSA company, which also kind of controls the RSA algorithm, has found general acceptance because it has all the desirable qualities of a hashing function. Desirable qualities being that the hash or the digest should be shorter than the original message, considerably shorter. Number two is that two different messages, even if they kind of only change in a small part, still should lead to two unique digests or two unique hashes. Those two properties of hashing, in fact it is a mapping which is a mapping from a large to a small, so there is always a possibility that the mapping may not be unique. But in the case of a digital signature, the mapping has got to be unique, otherwise of course you can repudiate. So the hashing function's requirement is that it should be short, number one, and that it should be tied down to the message in the sense that if any changes in the message take place, the hash will change. So that is a characteristic of a message digest, and MD5 is a good algorithm which is used. And the hashed text is encrypted by the sender using its private key. What is meant by that is that the private key is unique to me as a sender. So, if I actually hash take the message and hash it, have a unique hash, and I encrypt it with my private key, then that means that I have signed it, because private key is only known to me. So, having encrypted this message digest, the receiver can decrypt it with his public key, because private key and public key are symmetric. So, the receiver will use his public key, use your public key to decrypt it and obtain the hash which you have encrypted. He also would have received the message directly, and then he will hash the message and see if the hash message he received is the same as the decrypted hash message which you signed. If the two are equal, then the receiver says that it is properly signed, because it is tied to the digest or tied to the message. If the two do not match, then the receiver says that if they match, it is signed and authenticated plain text. And if it is not, doesn't match, then of course he says it's a fake message. So it is the reason why it is called signatures, as I said, it is encrypted to the private key of the sender, which only he knows. Okay. So this is essentially the picture of the entire methodology, a block diagram, and very easy to explain on the block diagram. The sender, in fact, I think we can, it's a fairly straightforward thing you can see here. In fact, I am using the digital encryption standard also in this case, but that part, see that part may not even be necessary, because instead of sending the message and encrypted with the key like here, the message could as well go here. Okay. So I can just look at it in the following way: sender sends the message, and the message is what would the message be? I have to encrypt it with the public key of the receiver. There is an error here, looks like. See, because actually I cannot receiver's private key I don't really know. Okay. The receiver's public key is only what is known to the sender. Okay. So the sender has to encrypt it with this is only signature part. See, so the actual message part, let me just look at it this way. Let us forget about this part, okay, which is really the part which does encryption. Okay. In fact, even either way, there should be ours. There is receiver's public key. So encrypted with receiver's public key. So the message is encrypted with receiver's public key, and the receiver can use his private key to decrypt. Okay, and he gets the message. In this case, what I have done is the key is encrypted, and the key is also sent here, and the message is encrypted using this and decrypted using the same key, so that you got this received message. Okay. The only mistake is that this should be public and this should be private. Okay. So ours public key is the one which is used to encrypt K, and ours private key is what he uses to decrypt K, and then the message comes here. So this is a received message. Right. Now he takes a hash. The message is taken and it is hashed by the sender using the MD5 algorithm or hashing algorithm, and the hashed function comes here, and it is encrypted with the sender's private key. Sender knows his private key, and that is what is meant by signature. So he is signing, okay, with his private key, and so there is a actually encrypted message digest, and now the sender's public key is known by the receiver, so he can decrypt it using the public key of the sender, and having done that, he will get the hash, okay, because the hash has been encrypted and decrypted, so the hash has come. He has also received the message. He has to see whether the message is what was sent by the sender, or the message was tampered with on the way by somebody, changed, and so on, and also that the sender later on cannot repudiate. So the message received by the receiver is hashed by him. The hash function is publicized for both. Both of them have to use the same hash function, and both of them agree, for instance, that both of them will use MD5, for instance. This hash function again would be normally put as part of the computer program for digital signature, and that program itself will do the digest. In other words, you say, you kind of click you pick up an icon and say hash, and then it will just hash it, okay, using the MD5 algorithm, which is a standard algorithm. And so the receiver also will use the same algorithm, and he will get from the received message the hash function, and then he will compare these two hashes, and if they compare, signature is okay and accept the message. If they are not okay, they don't match, then it's a forgery, okay. Somebody has in between come and done it, or it's somebody masqueraded, because if somebody masqueraded, that means he doesn't know your private key, some other private key used, then of course you could have decrypted also, okay. So the primarily it kind of protects you against even somebody kind of gets your private key, but then he has changed the message, then of course you can't do anything. If you lose your private key, it is like losing your seal, okay. So you cannot lose your private key, that has got to be extremely confidential with you, okay. So now because two hashes match, nobody on the way could have changed it, okay. So this is primarily the whole idea, okay. In fact, you can remove this and say message is sent and encrypted by the recipient's public key, okay. That is what is important. I think that is a stupid error here. I mean, while typing it is made a mistake. It should be a private key, because any public key algorithm only knows the public key of the recipient. It doesn't know the private key, okay. A sender knows his own private key. He will not know the public key of the he will know only his private. He will not know the private key of anybody else, okay, because that is highly secret. So they only for signing you use your private key, and because of the symmetry of the algorithm, RSA algorithm, signature also works, because whatever encrypted with the private key can be decrypted with the public key. That is, you encrypt with your private key, it is decrypted by your public key, okay. So this is the general idea about a digital signature, okay. Now there are other problems which arise with digital signature. First of all, you are using the public key while when you are setting this, you are using the public key of the recipient. See, the public key of the recipient is being used here for encrypting. So the public key should be authenticated, okay. As the hash message in digital signature system is decrypted using sender's public key, again signature also depends upon the sender's public key. In other words, I am decrypting using the public key of the sender. So the sender's public key, if it's publicized it, you should be sure that the sender in fact does have this public key, okay, and so there must be some certification authority. As the hash messages digital signature system is decrypted using sender's public key, this key must be certified as belonging to the sender by an independent authority. In fact, the Information Technology Act puts down a requirement of certification of public keys. Certification of public keys, the primary authority, certification authority which oversees the entire certification process is in the Ministry of Information Technology of the Government of India, and there is an official who is designated as the person in charge of this certification authority. Certification authority will allow some vendors to give digital signature certificates, because there may be a lot of people who want to have public keys. So one official in one government department may not be in a position to do it very effectively. So what the government decided was to kind of allow some reputable companies to maintain a public key infrastructure and have the authority to issue public key certificates to the various people who want it. So normally when two parties want to actually carry out business among themselves, each one will exchange their public key. They'll also give their certification and certification number and things like that to the other person. Suppose I want to transact business with you. I know your public key, but I really want to make sure that it is indeed your public key and that you do really exist as a legal company. Then I will ask you for your public key certificate number and the issuing authority, and you have to give me that information. Then I can go to the public key and the person who has given you that and quote the number and say, this person says that he has this public key and the certification number is this. Can you let me know whether such a company or a person does exist or not. A certification authority for maybe a fee will give you the information, and the certification authority has to actually, in order to authenticate the public key, what he would normally do is to kind of verify the presence of the other company. Like for instance, whether he has a sales tax registration number, income tax payment and stuff like that. So certification authority keeps database of public keys of organizations participating in e-commerce after verifying the credentials. What is meant by credential verification is essentially, as I said, physical address. Just like whenever you want to try to get a phone, the company will ask you for your physical address and proof of physical address by giving either the ration card or passport or what have you. So some certified thing, that is, passport is considered a good enough document to actually certify an individual's address and his actual physical presence, because the passport is issued only after police verification of the existence of a person. So the provider, like a telephone company, for giving a telephone or even a mobile phone, is supposed to actually find out using some authentic document like a passport or so on to authenticate your address and to kind of authenticate whether you really exist as a person, okay, that you are not Benami individual, that is somebody who doesn't exist but pretends to exist. There has been a serious problem recently because a number of mobile phone companies have been giving mobile phone connections to non-existent persons, particularly the prepaid cards, prepaid SIM cards. And so for law enforcement, when they want to kind of trace a particular mobile phone from SIM card, it becomes difficult because the person is kind of a phantom person, it doesn't exist really. So you want to avoid that phantom people in the internet and e-commerce. That's the reason why the certification authority actually may even send inspectors to your residence or to your company to find out whether you actually are present, and ask for documents like sales tax registration, stuff like that, before issuing a public key certificate. Okay, and this is the primary point. Now, of course, number of companies I know, for instance, TCS is a recognized company for issuing public key certificates. There are many other companies which have been allowed, the reputable companies, which are well-known companies, which are willing to maintain a public key infrastructure, keep this database of public keys, and make sure that the credentials of all the parties and so on. And it's a fair amount of work, but of course they do it at a fee. Okay, and of course that fee is, of course, they'll have some little profit on doing that. Okay. So this primarily then to conclude this digital signature idea, the two important points is that the message is sent as it is but encrypted, and it is encrypted with the public key of the receiver, and the receiver decrypts it and gets a message which may be a purchase order or code or whatever. And signature is done on the digest by the private key of the sender. See, public key is one which you know, see, and the public key is one which is actually authorized by the certification authority. The reason why the public key is authorized is authenticated is because the receiver now decrypts the message digest using the public key of the sender and gets a message digest, and then he compares the received message digest with the digest which came after signing, and that's how it authenticates the message. And that is the primary reason why the entire digital signature requirement has three basic requirements: public key and private keys, public key certification, and agreement on message digest and a unique message digest. These are requirements of any digital signature system. Okay. Because without a certifying authority, digital signature will not have any meaning, particularly when it comes to a litigation in a court of law. The next topic which is important in electronic commerce is payment. Payment is a very important part of any commercial transaction. If you go to a shop and buy some items, there are many ways you can pay for the item. One way of paying for the item is by cash, good old cash. If it is an item which doesn't cost too much, like you are buying a packet of biscuits which may cost 10 or 12 rupees, then only you give a cash and be off with it. Okay. Even a very expensive item, like maybe a music system which may cost 10,000 rupees, there are two ways of paying for it in normal systems. One way of paying for it is to write a check. If you write a check, of course the shopkeeper should actually trust you. that you have a good credit risk and that your check will not be fake. So he will accept your check if he knows you and if he has faith in you. He may not accept checks from all and sundry, because a check is not a cash. He has to send it to the bank and the bank has to encash it, and you must have some money in your bank. There is not enough money in the bank, the check will bounce. But as of today, of course, there is a law which says that you cannot issue a check when you don't have money in the bank. And if you do that, you are liable to be prosecuted and sent to jail. But as you know, our legal system is so slow that shopkeepers don't want to go to court and stuff like that. So they would prefer to get cash from you, or the third method of paying is a credit card. So you have a credit card, you give a credit card, and the credit card is used by the vendor, and nowadays it's a very common method. Apart from credit card, there is also debit cards. Debit cards are somewhat different. Credit card is that you give the credit card and you get a bill from the bank, say a few days later, about 25 days to 1 month later. So you get some kind of a credit period for you to pay the money. And also there is no need to pay the whole amount simultaneously. You can pay in small installments, but of course they will charge you interest on outstanding. Okay. So there is one way. The other is debit card. Debit card is that you have a bank account, and so the debit card will actually debit your bank account directly. So unless you have money in the bank, you cannot get a debit card, because it will be not accepted. Because if it has not enough credit balance in your bank, the debit card will be rejected. But more commonly, by and large, people, many shops don't even, I don't know for what, I don't know if there is a good reason or not, but I know that many shops accept credit cards, but they don't accept debit cards, or because of the fact that there are two different type of equipment they require for these two, and most shops seem to have a equipment for credit card, and they prefer to work with credit card rather than debit cards. But that anyhow, that's up to the shop. So similarly, in electronic commerce, one would like to have, so said any commercial transaction, payment is an integral part of goods supplied, as is obvious. 4 types of payments can be made in e-commerce. Okay. In e-commerce also there are number of different payments which can be made. One is credit card payments. See, normally in C2B e-commerce, customer to business e-commerce, such as when you want to kind of buy some books from Amazon.com or IndiaBooks.com and so on, you give a credit card number, and that is used by the recipient, and then he authenticates the credit card and gives you the goods once the credit card is authenticated. All right. So this is one way of payment, because there only thing credit card is given, credit card number is given. But many people are somewhat wary of revealing the credit card number on the internet, because unless security is very good, if somebody else gets hold of your credit card number, then he can masquerade as you and give the credit card number and then get the payment, get the goods. The question really is, credit card number also must be signed by some method. Apart from the credit card number itself, there must be some signature. That requires certain kind of protocols and certain kind of infrastructure, and in many situations in India, that signature part is missing. What they only do is that the credit card is encrypted and sent, and is decrypted by the receiver. And this is not enough, because encryptions can be sometimes broken, and also the receiver, if he receives your credit card number, there could be a leakage source there. So one of his employees can get hold of the credit card number and use it in without authentication, which has happened in banks and so on. So unless it's a watertight system whereby the receiver does not know your credit card number, it can't work too well. And in India and also in many countries currently, it turns out that it's a little bit of a risk you are taking. And that's the reason why there is not a tremendous growth in the e-commerce with credit cards per se. But of course, if it's a small amount of money, you don't mind. But with a large amount of money, you do worry about revealing your credit card number on the net. Of course, even otherwise, if your credit card number gets known by somebody, he can order something which is very expensive, okay, without your knowledge. So that is a dicey affair. So there must be a method of ensuring the secrecy of the credit card number, and also the credit card later on you cannot repudiate and so on. So there must be a signature also for that. These two requirements are there. But many of the systems currently in use do not have this. That is the reason people are worried about it. Apart from credit card payment, the other payment, of course, is by check. And normally check payments are the ones which are used between two businesses. In B2B e-commerce, check payments are more common. In fact, it is normally equivalent of check would be authorizing your bank by the electronic clearing system to debit your account and credit the account of the recipient. That is, suppose I ordered some items and I had to pay 2 lakhs of rupees for those items to a vendor. I kind of send a request to my bank to debit my account by 2 lakhs and credit it to the recipient's account. And this is all done electronically. Of course, you got to do it extremely securely. Okay. So that is other method of payment. Third method of payment would be cash payment, equivalent of cash. But then cash has got a lot of problems. See, the whole advantage of cash transactions, cash is anonymous. What is meant by anonymous cash is that suppose you lose 10 rupees, so you drop 10 rupees from your purse, somebody else picks it up, he can use the 10 rupees. So it is not kind of tied to you. It's kind of a exchange mechanism which is kind of open. In other words, cash is anonymous. So anonymity of cash transaction to maintain on the web is somewhat difficult. And governments do not also want to have large cash transaction taking place in an anonymous way on the internet. In an actual physical situation, also cash transactions beyond a certain amount governments don't normally allow, because they do put a limit on how much cash you can put into a bank account. When you exceed a certain amount, you have to kind of reveal your income tax PAN account number and stuff like that. So by and large cash transactions are discouraged on the net by governments, and so normally cash transactions are somewhat dicey on the net, and even though people have been trying to kind of mimic cash transactions, it has not been very successful. It because of the limitations of the net itself. The fourth kind of payment, which is somewhat slightly different from huge cash transactions, is transactions of small amounts. What is meant by small amounts is, suppose you want to get say 10 pages of an article and then get it to you. That 10 pages may cost only about 10 rupees or something like that. It's a very small transaction. So a small cash transaction, one would like to be able to have some method of debiting. In other words, keep some little balance with somebody, and every time you make a small transaction like this, you debit that, and so there is a limit which is put to this cash transaction, so that you don't come afoul of governments and so on. And also the method which is used is such that security is not all that important if it is a small cash transaction. So you can make it fairly fast. In other words, the point is that if the transaction cost is very large and the amount is very small, one won't like to kind of use a big transaction cost for a low cost item. That is the reason why if you use a credit card in a shop and you want to buy something which is worth 15 rupees and want to give a credit card, he will not accept it, because the certain kind of, there is a minimum limit which is required above which you have to have transaction for credit cards to be used effectively, because credit card transaction itself costs some money and that cost may exceed 10 rupees. So there is no point in using credit cards for small amounts. So you need to have some other method, like of course in normal shops you use pure cash. Okay. So now I would like to look at first manual credit card payment system. How does manual credit card payment system work? And then we will try to see if we can mimic this manual system to an extent possible. I mean, because anything which is manual cannot be entirely mimicked in electronic system. So you would like to be able to mimic to the extent feasible. Okay. So one has to first look at what are all the parties involved. 4 parties are involved in the credit card payment: customer having a credit card, a merchant who accepts the credit card, the merchant will put a notice saying that Visa cards, MasterCards, etc. accepted here and so on. So there are credit cards of many companies give it, and banks which issue the credit cards. Okay, I mean the Visa has a arrangement with SBI, and we also have arrangement with many banks, and bank is the one which ultimately handles cash. An acquirer, which is a financial institution that establishes an account with a merchant, validates credit card information, sent electronically by a merchant, and authorizes sale. So all 4 parties are involved. So we will continue from this point onwards next time and look at credit card payments in the electronic world. So we will continue from this point onwards next time and look at credit card payments in the electronic world.